Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Leah Catherine and this is Leah Sees Movies, back again to talk about the first Marvel movie in over 2 years, which is an absolutely insane sentence to say after like 3 a year for so long. But yeah, Black Widow has finally and officially hit theaters and Disney Plus. Let's talk about it. Black Widow was directed by Kate Shortland and written by Eric Pearson, Ned Benson, and Jack Schaefer, who most of us have heard of because she was the head showrunner for WandaVision, and that is a pretty glowing endorsement, actually. Starring Scarlett Johansson in her final turn as Natasha Romanoff, and Florence Pugh, David Harbour, and Rachel Weisz. This movie was in a really unfortunate position because yes, it's the first Marvel movie in 2 years, and that means everyone is just like dying to get back to a theater and get back to, you know, the new normal, the old normal, whatever. But we have had some Marvel content. We've actually had quite a lot of it in the last 6 months of the year between WandaVision, Falcon Winter Soldier, and Loki. So we've been getting a pretty steady amount of Marvel. So it was like, it wasn't the first thing back, but it was kind of the first thing back in a theater for a lot of us. And it also is a movie that came out about a decade too late. I'm not gonna lie, pretty high on the list of why is this movie, why do we have it? Scarlett Johansson's dead, like Black Widow is dead. Like, this is absolutely the wrong year. Like 2012, people were writing Avengers fan fiction, people were shipping Clinton, Natasha, that could have been her time. 2014, after Winter Soldier, everyone was like, OMG, Nat is so cool, where's her movie? That could have been her time. And then we waited till after she died, and then we waited even more because there was a pandemic, and it was just like, this either has to be like the best movie of all time, or it's gonna suck and I'm gonna hate it. And it's neither. It's good, I enjoyed it. Honestly, I had the worst day. So it was not just a relief of like, yay, I'm in a Marvel movie and I'm surrounded by fans and I'm in a theater, I'm in an IMAX theater. It was also just like a really welcome relief from a really shitty day. So if you're also having a shitty day, I'd watch it. I really enjoyed it, especially if you like Marvel movies. Like, what's to lose? But were there flaws? Absolutely. So first off, Natasha Romanoff in her last outing, I liked her character because I think we got to see her actually fleshed out. We've gotten all these wonderful hints, and I mentioned Winter Soldier earlier, which I think is maybe her best movie, of when I was like, oh yeah, this person is an integral part of the team and I like what she adds to the dynamic. But she was always kind of limited. She always had to kind of be snarky and funny and rarely got moments of emotionality, but when we did get them, it was usually related to making amends for her past and keeping this family together, this family she had formed out of the Avengers. So this movie kind of takes those two main sticking points of her character and just expands on them a little bit. First thing being on her past as a Russian spy in the Red Room, which, by the way, the intro to this movie, the intro credit sequence is excellent. Like, I actually was watching it going, I think the rest of the movie might fall short of this because I was so enthralled in it. It's just a lot of quick shots with very, you know, eerie music over it, but you're seeing the formation of the Red Room and you're seeing all of these girls be kidnapped and abused and molded into these assassins, and it's, you know, there's no dialogue really. It's just these horrifying kind of close-up shots of like just crying children. But it was very effective and it was very affecting. I felt really bad and I was really invested in the Red Room and all those girls. At the opener, at the outset, I was really into it. Black Widow opens in the 90s in Ohio, where the Red Room has placed a young Natasha, Yelena, Melina, and Alexei to play the part of the average American family so they can infiltrate a nearby SHIELD outpost. 21 years later, the movie picks up following the events of Civil War, where Natasha is on the run from Thunderbolt Ross. When she receives a mysterious package from her long-lost sister at her safe house, she reunites with her, where she finds out that the Red Room that she thought had been inactive since she had transferred to SHIELD was not only open, active, but they had perfected the art of brainwashing. The mysterious package was actually the cure for that, which has the capability to free all the widows. Sure. We've done a lot of brainwashing. What's a little more? Following that, Natasha and Yelena team up to take down the Red Room once and for all, and along the way reunite with their assigned family, Melina, who turns out to be a scientist, and Alexei, played by David Harbour, as the Red Guardian and the original Soviet super soldier. Of the 4 main cast members, I would say Florence Pugh as Yelena steals the show by far. Like, she was so funny and relatable, but also had these amazing emotional beats. If you have seen Midsummer, you know that Florence can cry. The girl can cry hard, and cry in a very kind of physically painful looking way, and she kind of utilizes that skill to her best effect when she's not being dry and sarcastic and making fun of the way that Natasha tends to pose when she lands. It's like not fully meta commentary, but it's nudging on there. And it was really interesting because we've seen Natasha as kind of the dry, sarcastic one in relation to the rest of the Avengers, and specifically against like Sam and Steve, who are a lot more earnest and heartfelt, and she was always kind of the sly, snarky one. And it was interesting to kind of see her being the teasing victim. Like, she now has this younger sister who doesn't take her seriously, who doesn't think she's like this mysterious Black Widow. She's been through the same thing, she's been through the same training, and that shared trauma and the shared memories of family, even though they were fake, even though they were, you know, playing a part in a mission, that brings them together in a way that Natasha never really got to be with the other Avengers. She never really got to open up. Yes, she would die for them and they would fight for her, but she didn't have that shared history, and she never shared her history either with the Avengers or with us. So this was all brand new, and it was kind of nice to see more of her than just the super spy. Scarlett Johansson isn't bad in this role. She's played it for, at this point, over a decade. I think she's very much comfortable in it, and she kind of slides right back in. But it was easy to get distracted because Yelena was so much more fun and new, you know, new toy. And also because Natasha's dead. And despite me actually enjoying this movie a bit more than I thought I would, it does make it as like a little harder to connect to it, because you're just going like, oh, this ultimately means nothing. If you're thinking about the future, it's Yelena, and you know it's Yelena because Natasha's dead. So when you look at certain scenes and you're going like, ooh, I wonder what's gonna happen next, you know what's gonna happen next, Infinity War. You know what's gonna happen after that, she's gonna die. So as much as I enjoyed it, I think she was kind of easily overshadowed, and not necessarily by like a bad performance, just but by the lack of hype for the future and the lack of expectation for her to go anywhere, because you know she can't. David Harbour, I would say, after Yelena, was kind of the big standout for me as a comedic piece. I never watched really Stranger Things. I didn't watch the new Hellboy. So even though I've heard a lot of great things about David Harbour, I haven't actually like seen him in many things that I've watched. So this is probably my first real exposure to him in a movie, and he was great. Like, he played a really fun, happy dad in the first like 10 seconds of the movie, and you were like, yeah, sure. But the rest of the movie, he is a loud, tattooed, gold tooth, Russian, screaming dude. He's hysterical. All he wants to do is fight, and you respect it of him. He's completely, if you know, you get the Yelenas and the Natashas who are secretive and hard and whatever, he's this perfect foil to it. He was very open and honest about his desires and about the things that he enjoys, and I really liked that. It gave, you know, it would have been a very closed off movie without the lightness that he brought to it, and he got by far the biggest laughs in the theater that I was at. I will say, they again marvel with the fat jokes that didn't need to be there, because he's also a super soldier. We see him do incredible feats of strength and speed and stamina. He jumps like a good 6-foot vertical, and he does it all with a gut, which would be fine because he has the super soldier serum. Why do you need to be, you don't need to go through the machine and come out with an 8-pack. We've seen the same thing in Falcon and Winter Soldier. Like, I mean, they were all young and skinny, but presumably they started that way. They weren't transformed into that, and it could have just accepted that. The movie could have just been like, that's Red Guardian, this is how he looks. But instead, as we've seen in some of the trailers, it's like, haha, I could barely fit into my suit. Or there's even a line where Rachel Weisz is like, oh, you've got fat. Like, it's 2021. It's not the slam dunk joke you think it is, Marvel. It's time to move on. Especially because, like with Fat Thor, I liked seeing superpowered people who didn't have an 8-pack. Let it be, let it be, let it live. People look like that. Rachel Weisz was fine. She was fine. I personally am not a huge fan of her, and I don't think she was particularly charismatic in this movie. She had, you know, her character had like kind of emotionally affecting moments. Melina was kind of an interesting character, again, kind of looking into what decades of trauma does to a woman and does to a character. At what point can you break free from an abusive system when you've been in it so long, it's all you know? So all of her character beats are pretty interesting. I just maybe didn't necessarily find her the most engaging character on screen. If any of the other characters were on screen, I was a little bit more interested in them. As I mentioned earlier, the main villain of this movie is a man named Dreykov, who is the head of the Red Room. And between the Black Widows, the Winter Soldiers, and S.H.I.E.L.D., it's a various agents and Ghost. I have to assume the MCU is mostly spies. Like, I have to think 15% of their population are trained assassins, because there's a lot of people claiming to control the flow of politics in this world. Because, like, I feel like when we got to Winter Soldier, it was such a big deal. Like, OMG, he killed JFK. We've been slowly shaping American history in the world through, like, carefully planned assassinations. And then in Black Widow, they're like, yeah, we got, like, a bajillion widows. They are everywhere. They are in everything. And I just have to wonder, how many politicians are making it to 50 in this world? Because it doesn't seem like their odds are good. I mean, I realize it's kind of the nature of the beast of any superhero world, any Marvel comic. Like, for every spy organization, there's another 14 spy organizations. But in real life, you do hit a point where you're like, no one realized that the Black Widow program was not only alive and well, but had perfected mind control and had like hundreds of agents out. Y'all suck at your jobs. Like, S.H.I.E.L.D., you suck. And now S.W.O.R.D., I mean, S.W.O.R.D's mostly space, but now they're home-based. While the Red Room is a pretty interesting backstory and a very interesting villain psychologically, Dreykov, the head of the Red Room, not that interesting. I think he was a fairly standard, like, Russian villain TM. Like, if you've seen Tenet, him and that guy are like the same thing. Like, you could literally, I think, put them in each other's movies and very little would change. He doesn't have a lot of personality. He doesn't seem like, oh, he's the head of the Red Room because he's super smart, because he's super strategic, because he's super whatever. He seems like a blustery dude, middle-aged, who likes having hot 20-year-old women obey every single thing he says. And that is just a middle-aged dude with, like, it's not, which, I mean, I guess that's the real villain, but superhero movie-wise, you could do that plus. Like, it needs to be like, here's a villain who's based in reality, plus something that makes him interesting for people to super punch. Because I was just like, eh. What Dreykov represented in this movie and what he represented as the Black Widow's past hit a lot harder than he did, literally, what you'd get if you saw the movie. As his protector slash guard dog to go retrieve the vials of brainwashy cure juice is Taskmaster. And yeah, they did Taskmaster dirty. I have been rooting for Taskmaster to be in the MCU for a couple years now. I was really excited when Taskmaster got announced. I was disappointed in the costume though. I wanted the comic costume. It is insane. It is colorful. It is ridiculous. But I was into it. I was like, hell yeah, let's make it goofy. And they didn't do that because they're cowards. Taskmaster's barely in the movie. It literally, one scene, I think I can like actually maybe single hand how many scenes Taskmaster's in, like doing stuff. And although I really enjoy that the choreographer for Taskmaster is very clearly pulled from a lot of other recognizable hero moves, like there's a knife flip where I'm like, I have watched Bucky throw knives since 2014. I know that knife throw, that's the Winter Soldier. We get the very recognizable hands with the claws, clearly Black Panther. We obviously see the bow and arrow, Hawkeye. But I think it's really cool when you can recognize the fight styles, when you see how distinct they are after 15 years. I That I really enjoyed, and I would have liked to see more of that. But you don't really get to see Taskmaster v Natasha. You don't really get to see Taskmaster v Yelena, which you think would be the big thing, because like I said, the actual head villain is just a dude. So if you're gonna give me like the cool fights, it's gonna be with Taskmaster, and they don't really. And at one point you end up with a Taskmaster v Red Guardian fight, which really and truly felt like they just had to pair people up to make them do something. As much as I mentioned earlier how much I enjoyed David Harbour in this movie, he was very good for a laugh, very good for one specific emotional moment that I can recall, but in the action scenes and in the kind of major plot driving parts of the film, he felt kind of pointless. He didn't have a major role to play. His action scenes seemed like they went, we have a Red Guardian, so we need to do something with him. Taskmaster? Yeah, make him go fight Taskmaster. Sure. An action scene should feel warranted. It should feel like this fight needs to happen for us to get from A to B. This fight needs to happen for revenge. This fight needs to happen for some other reason. And some of them didn't. It felt like they were like, oh, this fight needs to happen because this is an action movie. And I think they could have just been a bit more comfortable with making it a slow, sleuthy movie. Like, Natasha's an assassin. Be sneaky. These are all really big, like, Bourne Ultimatum type car chases, big explosions. And I was just like, sneakier. I think this is a movie where I was really expecting it to pull on Winter Soldier and pull on, like, when I talk about how Taskmaster wasn't really present in this movie, neither was Winter Soldier, technically. In screen time, he had, what, 15 minutes, 20 minutes of the 2-hour movie, but because he was so well used, he was so intimidating, you could see how he was more efficient, more ruthless, more dangerous than any other threat in this movie. Every time he was on screen, he made an impact. Taskmaster was like, oh crap, scary at first. Then it was like, oh crap, Taskmaster's a mimic, that's cool. And then there was an explosion, and you're like, use the bow and arrow, use something sleuthy, punch someone. In fact, even that little Black Panther move, you don't see any clawing, you just see that there's claws. I think one thing I really expected was like a Nat and Yelena team up moment, and we kind of didn't get one. And by team up moment, I mean, like, you know, back-to-back fighting. You do get one scene where you see it also in the trailers where they fight each other, and like, the whole point is they were trained exactly the same, so they always have a counter move for each other's moves because they know what the other one's about to do. So when you see them fight at one point, you're like, oh yeah, they're gonna team up and they're gonna be like so perfectly in sync because they know each other and they know how each other moves, and they don't do that. And it seems like if you're gonna do a fight scene, that was the fight scene, right? Like, that's common sense. Anyway, whatever. Did I mention I love Yelena? Did I say that? I feel like I said that, but I want to reiterate, I loved her. I loved her so much. One thing I really enjoyed about this movie that's not a plot thing and not an acting thing and not a score thing. Every girl's hair was tied up. Not every girl. I saw a couple of loose bobs. But pretty much every widow we are introduced to or see in hindsight, they at least have something like this going on. Hair is not in their face, but I was seeing like fully braided, you know, wraparounds, like, you know, Yelena's. I was seeing ponytails, I was seeing buns, I saw Bantu knots. I was like, hell yes! We are going for every form of hair restraint, and that is good. After Birds of Prey, I just never ever want to watch an action movie with a woman and see her hair in her eyes. It makes me mad. We're past that. As much as I am a long hair Bucky stan, and I realize it's completely improbable, I do enjoy it when women are dressed appropriately for combat. It makes me happy. It looks better, it feels better, it makes the scene more believable. Because anyone who's ever had their hair down knows if you tilt your head down a little, you can no longer see. There's one specific scene in the last act of the movie that felt like such a callback to some of Natasha's better moments just throughout the whole MCU. Like, if I think of, oh, what was a good Black Widow scene, and one of them is of course the scene in Avengers where she's being interrogated and she's just like, Oh my god, these guys they're telling me everything. And it's just like, no wait, you're the victim here. And we get another replay of that kind of scene, and it felt great because it's like, for me, who wasn't really a big Iron Man fan, so I didn't really remember her from those movies, that was my like really first introduction to Black Widow. I was like, I like her, she's cool. I like playing it off. I like the like, no, of course I'm not the victim here. I was tricking you, you're very stupid. She does the same thing obviously with Loki, and I feel like we haven't gotten to see her interrogate people again, and the fact we get another playthrough of that style of scene where she's, you know, she's caught out, she needs help, and of course she doesn't. She had a plan, she thought it through, and she was using this man's confidence against him. And I really enjoyed how that played out, and it gave me the warm fuzzies of like, hell yeah, that's the Black Widow that I was introduced to, and that's the Black Widow that I really liked and wanted to see more of in 2012. And then you get to the end of the movie, and I feel like there's a weird thing where if this had been released actually after Civil War, you'd have been like, oh boy, like she's gonna go get the Avengers back together and like we're gonna make it work. And at the time in 2016 or 2017, whatever, it would have been like, ooh, I wonder what happens next. Like I said earlier, the fact that we know she goes to die soon means it's a little less interesting, like, because the whole end of the movie feels like, okay, we could honestly just cut. Like, now that this story is over, this kind of little interlude about like, you know, now that I've reintroduced with one family, let me go see if I can get my other family back together. And it's like, nah, you know who's gonna get your other family back together? Thanos. Sorry. But I also think that's just kind of the nature of having to fit a movie within a timeline rather than at the end or beginning of it. Because, you know, other movies just tell their story and then what happens next is someone else's problem. But because this movie knows that it is stuck between two existing movies, one very rigid timeline, it has to kind of bend a little bit out of what would be a comfortable shape to accommodate that. Despite my misgivings about the way it plays out, it does not feel entirely natural. I do think it is a better send-off for Natasha than the one she got in Endgame. I will also say, I think because, again, this is released now, after the fact, Endgame looks worse. Because the Natasha who had just gotten her family back, not just the Avengers family, but her original family and people who really know and understand her in a way that all these other people never have. And then for her to die, to sacrifice herself and say to like Hawkeye, oh well, you have something to go back to, I don't, blah blah blah. And it's just like, she quite literally has someone to go back to now. Like, she does. The movie has now established that she really, really, truly does. She has a sister who loves her, and a family, and parents, kind of. They're weird, but they love her. And if you were already team, it should have been Hawkeye, that gets a little bit more grating. Like, the next time I watch Endgame, I'm just gonna be sitting there like, should have been Hawkeye, and this dialogue doesn't make any sense. So that's annoying. Anyway, this came off really negative. Yeah, so this wasn't a perfect movie. I have a not insignificant list of complaints that I've mentioned earlier, but I do think that this movie did a very good job as a family movie. I cared about these characters. I think it did a good job introducing them. I think it did a good job expanding on the concept of the Red Room, if not a good job putting ahead of the Red Room. He even did a good job mentioning the sterilization, the forced sterilization that is very badly handled in Age of Ultron. So that even comes back up and is handled in a much nicer way, and in a way that is sympathetic to, again, the topic of family. What does it mean to these girls who never really had one, and what does it mean when the only family you ever really had was a farce? What does it mean when you can't have your own biological family? And so those things were handled a lot better. And yes, the action wasn't the best part of the movie, but for a character that for most of her MCU career did not get to be a fully fleshed out person, I think it is a good thing that she went out on a note of humanity, on a note of family, and her last moment in the MCU was as a fully realized person. I think if it had been the inverse, if it had been like, I don't care about any of these characters but the fight scenes were cool, I think that would have been a much greater disservice to her character, and that would have done a much greater disservice to what she means as one of the original Avengers, as the first female Avenger. So yeah, not perfect, but I really liked it. I really liked being in an IMAX theater full of Marvel fans, and it really saved a really shitty day. So I don't know, 4 stars for that at least. Boom, boom, spoiler warning, because I'm gonna talk about the post-credit. In the post-credit, we get to see Yelena visiting Natasha's grave. Yes, I forgot her name for a second. Yelena goes to visit the grave, and who should show up but Countess something 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 Madame Veep. And I was really excited. Well, no, I was disappointed because I wanted Nick Fury. I was like, all right, 1 widow out, 1 widow in. Like, that's what we're gonna do. But Nick Fury is in space, I guess. So instead we're getting alt Nick Fury, and she's assembling her not Avengers. She already has not Captain America, and I guess now she's gonna have the other widow, and now she's sending the other widow after Clint, which I think is funny because, again, it should have been Clint. I will say, even though I'm not opposed to Yelena going after Clint because I think it's funny, I do think the fact that she spent like maybe 3 days with Natasha, and Natasha mentioned Clint like very fondly like 7 times, and then for the Countess to be like, ah, she's responsible for Nat's death, and she was just like, yeah, I would at least be like, well, she seemed to be very close friends with him. She seemed to care about him a lot. He's another Avenger. Like, is he responsible for her death and that he endangered her or harmed her, or is it just like he was there for her death? Because those are very different things, and I feel like Yelena would be smart enough to tell the difference, but I guess that's not how you get a good Disney Plus show going, so they're just gonna ignore that. Completely unrelated, the Eternals trailer looks amazing in IMAX. I liked it. It looked nice on my phone, but it wasn't quite the same. And then I saw it for the first time, you know, before this movie in IMAX, and was like, oh, yeah, that makes a difference. That makes a big difference. Seeing it on a screen bigger than my apartment makes a difference. Alright, well, that was very fun to talk about. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. If you want to talk about the movie, please comment below. If you don't want to do any of that, but you've watched all the way to the end of this video, thank you. I still really appreciate you. You can follow me on Twitter at LeahSeesMovies, and I will catch you next time. Peace!